Hello, everyone. My name is Katie Kosis. I'm the Director of Financial Aid at Niagara University. What we're going to go over today is a general overview of the financial aid process, completing the FAFSA form, and what your awards might look like once you start receiving award offers in the mail. Again, I am the Director of Financial Aid at Niagara University, but what we're going over today is, pertains to any financial aid you're applying to for any college. My contact information is up on the screen. You can either email me at kkosis@niagara.edu if you have any questions after this presentation, or feel free to give our office a call at 716-286-8686, and we'd be happy to help you with any general financial aid questions you might have. All right, so getting started, in order to apply for, most financial aid, any federal financial aid, certainly, you do have to complete the FAFSA forms. The FAFSA stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Assistance. In order to complete this, you do need to have an FSA ID. The student will need one, and then at least one parent will need one. Both parents, you can create one for both, but only one parent really needs to sign off on the FAFSA. So you have to create, one for the student, one for the parent. Be sure to use separate email addresses when you're going ahead and creating these. You can't use the same email address for both the student and the parent. It will start to mess things up down the line. So just make sure you are using those separate email addresses when creating these accounts. You can go directly to studentaid.gov/FSA-ID, and you can create your FSA IDs at any time, or you can actually create them while you're in the FAFSA form, and we'll get to that process in a minute. So what we're going to go over today is a FAFSA on the web worksheet for the 2022-23 year. The actual FAFSA is completed online, but this is going to give you a good overview of what information you will need in order to complete this. When you are going and completing the FAFSA, make sure you're in the right year. So if you are seniors right now, currently in high school, and you're going to be starting school in fall 22, please make sure you're completing the 2022-2023 FAFSA. There are currently 2 years out there. There's the 21-22 and then the 22-23. So just make sure you're completing the right one. We've already had some students, unfortunately, that are starting in next fall, but have applied for using this year's information. So you do have to just be, keep track of what one you're selecting. So the FAFSA is in the student's name. It will most likely require parental information to be put on there as well, but it is truly the student's FAFSA. So it's going to ask for basic student information, first name, last name, social security number, date of birth. Please be very careful when completing this, as we have seen, unfortunately, students or parents will get, sibling social security numbers mixed up, or maybe the date of birth is off by a day or so. So again, make sure you have your actual documents in front of you and you're using the correct numbers. It's going to ask if the student is a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-citizen, such as a permanent resident. The FAFSA, which is the Free Application for Federal Student Assistance, is only available for U.S. citizens or eligible non-citizens. It will ask the student's marital status. 9 times out of 10 coming out of high school, it's going to be single. It still asks for selective service information. That is no longer a requirement anymore for male students to be registered for the selective service. It used to be up until this year. They did get rid of that, but they still ask the question currently on the FAFSA. So you will see it, but you no longer are required to sign up for it in order to be eligible for federal aid. It's going to ask some questions about, parent 1, parent 2, the high school they have completed. They don't use, the language of mother, father on here. It is parent 1, parent 2. So please be sure you are keeping track of which parent, you're putting in for parent 1, and make sure you follow that along throughout the FAFSA, not mixing up the two. It will then ask some questions concerning the student's dependency status. It's going to try to determine if the student is considered either an independent student or a dependent student. If a student is considered a dependent student, they will have to provide parental information. And so that will be in the next step after you get through these questions. Again, 9 times out of 10, students coming out of high school most likely could be considered dependent students, and you will need to provide parental information. But if you can say yes to any one of these questions: were you born before 1999? Are you married? Do you have children you support? Are you in legal guardianship, or were you in foster care? Any one of those things, if you say yes to that, then you would be considered an independent student, and you only need to provide your information and not your parents'. I will say, though, that sometimes students will, say yes to these and they don't truly qualify. So you might be asked by the schools you're applying to provide some additional documentation to support you saying yes on this form. Okay, so let's say that, you don't meet any of those qualifications to be an independent student and you do have to report your parents' information. So the question I get asked a lot is, okay, so which parent do I report on the FAFSA? Well, if your parents are married or they're unmarried, but they're living together, then you're going to report both of their information on the FAFSA. If your parents are divorced, then you're going to report whoever you as a student live with more than 50% of the year during the prior 12 months. Now there's, 365 days in the year, so it truly can't be 50-50, but I know some legal, documents do say that the time is split equally. And if that's the case, it will then go to whichever parent provided the most financial support during those previous 12 months. Now, keep in mind that this could also mean, if you're on your parents' health insurance, like if you're on like parent one's health insurance, that includes as, financial support, child support. So those types of things you have to take into account when trying to determine which parent to report. Now, once you decide which parent, if your parents are divorced and, let's say you live with parent one, you would report parent one's information on the FAFSA. But if parent one is remarried, you also need to report step parents' information on there as well. It's one of the questions I get asked a lot, but yes, it is something you do have to provide. Even if they're not helping with college expenses, you do have to report their information on the FAFSA for step parents. All right, so once you determine which parent or parents to report on the FAFSA, it'll then go into asking information about them. Again, name, first name, last name, date of birth, social security number. It's going to ask if they filed taxes for the 2020 year. So for the 22-23 FAFSA, which you'll be filling out if you're starting in fall 22 for college, it is going to be based off of the 2020 tax year for tax information that you need to input. So hopefully, most taxes have been for 2020 have been filed by now or by then, and then you can use that information, into the FAFSA. It will give you an option at this point. If you say, yes, my parents completed taxes, it will give you an option to actually link up with the IRS and put that information directly from the IRS, the tax information that's on file with them, and put it directly into your FAFSA form. We highly recommend having this, choosing this option, as it will, carry over the correct information directly from the IRS that's on file. There are a few instances where you're not able to do this. If there's been like identity theft happened to someone in the family, your mom, your parents, then they would not be able to use this. Or if your parents are filing separately, they're not able to do this and you have to manually put it in. But if you're able to, please use the data retrieval tool that it gives the option for, as this would really help the universities or the colleges you're applying to know that, the information you put on there is as valid as it can be. If you, don't use the data retrieval tool, you have to manually put this in, again, using the 2020 taxes. So it'll just ask for just a gross income. It'll ask for taxes paid. It'll ask for a breakdown of wages for parent one, parent two. And the wages you still have to, even though if you use the data retrieval tool, you still have to kind of break it down between who earned what. It will then, after the income questions, it will then ask if anyone in the household in either 2020 or 2021, if anybody received free or reduced lunch, SNAP benefits, which used to be known as food stamps, Medicaid, SSI, any one of those things. If you, anyone in the family received any one of these things in either 2020 or 2021, you would check that off. And then it's also going to ask some additional questions if anyone in 2020 received, or if they paid child support, if they received child support, if they had any money going towards their 401k potentially. So if they can say yes to any one of these questions, then they'll have to input that information into the FAFSA. Sometimes there's, there's nothing to say, you didn't receive anything. So you just, kind of say no and move on to the next section. Now, one thing is that sometimes you might be asked for asset questions. Again, not everyone will be asked this. There's a lot of skip logic involved in the online FAFSA. And depending upon the, what you answered previously, you might not have to answer this. It's all a formula that the federal processor does. But if you are asked for asset information, all of this is based upon the current year. So unlike the taxes, which is based off of 2020, the asset questions are asked as of, the day you're filing the FAFSA. It's going to ask for cash, savings, and checking accounts, the amounts that are in there. If you have other investments like stocks or bonds, those would be included. This does not include your 401k. That is not included as an investment. But again, any other type of stocks or bonds. And if you have a business or investment firm, the net worth of those things. So after you get through the parent section asking all those questions, it will then revert back to the student section, and it will ask all the same questions, but just about the student. So did the student earn any income in 2020? Did they file taxes? Again, if you did file taxes, you can certainly use the IRS data retrieval tool, which we do highly recommend. And if you didn't, you just didn't file taxes, and maybe you earned some money but not enough to file, you would just put all that into the FAFSA. And again, it will also ask the students the same questions that the parent did about SNAP benefits, free reduced lunch, and you would just answer as appropriate. And same thing with all the additional questions on taxed income. Most times students don't have any of this. It really applies more to the parents. But if they do, you would just report that in the amount received. And again, students might be asked for the asset information, they might not, but if they are, it's the same questions as before. So that's pretty much the basic overview of the main questions you're going to be asked for the FAFSA. In order to actually fill this out, as I said before, it is an online form. So you're going to go to studentaid.gov to complete the FAFSA. Once you go in, you can say, go to the complete the FAFSA section. If you've never been there before, you're gonna go to start here. If you've, have a FAFSA from a prior year maybe, or you've already been to the site and you created an account already, you can go to log in using your FSA ID that you already created. Once you click on that, it'll say, okay, are you the student or are you the parent? It doesn't particularly matter which one you select. It's really just going to be how the questions are presented to you, all the same questions, just how they word it. I did already talk about the IRS data retrieval tool. I do, as I said before, highly encourage you to use it if you are able to. It's available to use, when the FAFSA opened up back in October. And again, we do recommend that students do this. Students and parents use the tool, as it will provide the most accurate information to schools so that, you can have hopefully an accurate financial aid package. A couple other things that will be asked on the FAFSA. It will ask for the number of people in the household. So, parent 1, parent 2, yourself, any siblings. And then it'll also ask how many people are in college. This is only for the dependents. So if your parents are in school as well in college, you wouldn't count them. But if you have any siblings, let's say it would be yourself and how many siblings are in college. But after you, complete the FAFSA and put all the information in, you will receive what is called a student aid report or a SAR report. Now, most times these are emailed to whatever email is on file. If there's no email put on the FAFSA, it'll be mailed to you, which will take a little bit longer. But it'll look something very similar to this. It will have, it's really just a summary of all the information you just put onto the FAFSA. So we just recommend you look it over and review it. Sometimes, parents and students will add an extra 0 somewhere when it's not supposed to. So you really would just want to make sure that all that information is correct. And some other information that will be on it will be the data release number, the DRN. It's a 4-digit number that allows, you can give that number to other schools. If they don't have your FAFSA, they can potentially add themselves to it if you give them this number. And the other big number to keep in mind is the expected family contribution, or the EFC. In this example, it's 0, but this is the standard number that is calculated using all the information you previously put into the FAFSA. Goes through the final processor, and they will then come up with this family contribution number. And it's really just a standard way of schools to be able to put together financial aid offers for each student, and that's what we derive it from. When you're in the FAFSA, you can list up to 10 schools on the FAFSA form. Each school will receive the FAFSA electronically within about 3 to 5 business days. Sometimes it's only a couple days, and then, sometimes if it's, peak, if the holiday time or something, it might be a little bit longer. So each school will receive that. Now, you can, as I said, only do 10 at a time, but if you are applying to more than 10 schools, that's perfectly fine. You would just go ahead and list those 10 schools on your FAFSA, and then give it about a week for it to process. Go back into the FAFSA after that week is up, take some schools off and put some schools on. Just be very careful to make sure that you're keeping track of who you're taking off and who you're putting on. Because if you end up going to a school that you originally took off that FAFSA, they're no longer receiving any updates. So it's really important for you to make sure that whatever school you do end up going to, that they are, still on the FAFSA. And then once schools do start to receive those FAFSA forms, they will check to make sure that you are an accepted student at that school. We can't put together financial aid offers until the student is accepted, and also until we have a FAFSA on file. So we'll combine those two things, and we'll start working on those financial aid offers. And then schools will start sending those out. You're going to see a range of when you receive these offers. It could be anywhere, maybe this month already, December, all the way through really. I mean, I have February up on the screen, but it really could be all the way through March or April, just really depending upon the school that you're applying to. Each school is different. So if you are wondering maybe where you are in the process, don't hesitate to reach out to the school and see what their timeline is, or if they're missing any information potentially. So now that we kind of got through, the details for the FAFSA, I wanted to go over some additional things you might hear as you're going through the financial aid process and kind of break down what some of these things mean. First is the cost of attendance, or the COA. We use lots and lots of acronyms in financial aid, as you will come to realize. But this cost of attendance is important because it really is kind of the cap for what schools are able to offer students. So it is comprised of two different components: direct cost, and those are things that are charged directly to your account, like tuition, fees, maybe books and supplies, room and board if you're living on campus, and the indirect costs, things that we know you're probably going to encounter but are not charged directly onto your account. This could be, transportation costs, personal cost, room and board if you're not living on campus, and sometimes books and supplies. So with those two components combine, and that creates your cost of attendance. And this, again, will vary widely from college to college because each school is different. Each school has different cost and how they determine that. So what your cost of attendance is at one school will not be the same at another. We then have your expected family contribution, or the EFC, which I kind of touched upon a few slides ago, but is the amount a family can reasonably be expected to contribute. It does stay the same regardless of what college you're applying to. So you could be applying to a state school or a private school. It doesn't matter. It's the same number calculated from the FAFSA form. Two components: the parent contribution and the student contribution, again, based upon all that information you put into the FAFSA when you're filling that out. And it is, goes through that federal processor and the federal formula. And again, the EFC is the amount that you can reasonably be expected to contribute. I want to point out, though, that although, let's say in the example I showed you was a 0 EFC, that does not necessarily mean that that is exactly what you're going to owe at that school. And again, it's really just more of a way for schools to be able to hand out financial aid to students, on a fair and even basis, as compared to what, telling you what exactly it is that you're going to owe. So, some students could have a 0 EFC, but they're actually going to owe $10,000. Or a student could have a, EFC of 10,000, but maybe they owe more than that. Maybe they owe less. So again, it really just depends on each student and each school. So then we get into the concept of financial need. So you'll hear need-based aid a lot, or do you have financial need? And it's really a formula that's done. We take your cost of attendance, we minus away your expected family contribution from the FAFSA, and that remaining number is your financial need. And that means that you can be packaged with need-based aid up to that amount. Need-based aid would be things like, subsidized loans, which we'll get to a little bit, federal work study, maybe some Pell Grants, some institutional money that's need-based, anything that kind of has that need word in it. We can't go over that amount based upon this calculation. So some of the types of financial aid you will start to see when you start to receive your financial aid offers. Scholarships and grants, these are things that are, don't have to be paid back. They are, sometimes based upon maybe how you've done in high school. Those are typically called merit scholarships, or your SATs or ACT scores. Grants, whether it's a need-based grant or from the institution, a Pell Grant, those are things you don't have to pay back, free money. And then you have your loans, which are technically, when you apply for the FAFSA form, it is your application for those federal loans. And these are things you would have to pay back after graduation or after you stop attending school. There's also, so those are federal loans. There's also private loans you can take out. There are Parent Plus loans you could take out. And then employment. So this would be something maybe like a work study job, or some type of employment on campus where you're, working, so many hours a week to earn either a paycheck, or maybe have someone that go towards your outstanding balance. So those are the four main types of aid you'll see within those financial aid offers. And the sources of those types of aid, the federal government is the largest source of financial aid, again, based upon that FAFSA form. It's really the driving factor in most of the aid that's offered out by schools. You also have state aid you can apply for, and we'll get to this, the New York State aid in a minute. Colleges and universities have their own aid. Again, a lot of it's going to be merit-based aid that they award you, and then they have their own need-based aid or maybe other scholarships. Private sources, so really this could be like community organizations or scholarships through like your high school, any one of those things. It's not from the federal government, it's not from the state, it's not from the school you're applying to. Anything above that would be considered a private source. Same thing kind of goes along with like civic organizations and churches and employers, you know, any type of scholarship program that's out there that you kind of have to apply for on your own that's outside of the school. As I said about the federal government, it is the largest source of financial aid. The aid is awarded primarily on the basis of having some type of financial need, again, based upon those calculations I talked about earlier. And you must apply for this every year using the FAFSA form. So it is something that, you know, it's not just like a one and done. You do kind of have to do this every year in order to be considered for a new round of federal aid, along with other sources. Some of the common federal aid programs you will see, the Pell Grant is probably the largest. This one currently is based off of what your financial contribution is on the FAFSA. If it's above about like 5,800 right now, you would not be eligible for the Pell Grant, but an EFC lower than that would be. There's also the Teach Grant. This is for students who are considering going into the education field and teaching in some very specific areas. You can talk to the schools you're applying to, but more information for that. The Opportunity Grant, you do have to be Pell Grant eligible in order to receive this grant. The Pell Grant is what we call like an entitlement. So if you're eligible for it, you get it. The Opportunity Grant, each school has kind of limited funding for this. So even though you might technically be eligible for it, you might not see it in your package just because each school receives a pretty small amount. Then there's the work study. It's typically federal money that you would, again, it'd be placed in your package and you would work on campus or maybe off campus nearby. I mean, here at Niagara, just speaking from our point of view, you know, our students work between 10 to 12 hours a week and they earn a paycheck every 2 weeks, or they can defer up, you know, some of it onto their account to help pay for the balance. And you do have to have financial need for that one. Then you have your subsidized and unsubsidized loans. So your subsidized loan is a need-based loan, meaning that you have to have financial need in your package in order to have this. The government pays the interest on this loan while the student is in school. The unsubsidized, the government does not pay the interest, so interest is accruing as the student is in school. Right now it's a very small percentage. It's around, you know, like 2.5 to 3% right now, so it's not too horrible, but interest is accruing. For freshman students coming in, there's a cap of 5,500 for the year, whether it's subsidized or unsubsidized. You might have a combination, but together the cap is 5,500. That does go up $1,000 for your sophomore year and then another $1,000 for your junior and senior years. And then the PLUS loan, this is a federal loan, but it is the parent's name. So it is something that parents can apply for on behalf of their students to help pay off maybe some of the remaining balance that might be on that account. Now, states, if you are a New York State resident attending a New York State school, you might be eligible for some grants from New York State. When you are in the FAFSA form, after you hit the submit button at the very end, to say, you know, congratulations, you've completed your FAFSA. It'll have a link to say, would you like to transfer information from the FAFSA into your state application? I say, you know, go ahead and do this. It's the easiest way most times. And if you do have to create an account with the state site, but it will, once that's done, it will transfer over you know, most of the information from the FAFSA into the state application. There'll be a few more things you have to answer, but it really does, you know, save a lot of time. If you don't do it right after the FAFSA, that's okay. You just have to go back directly into the state application and complete it there. It's hesc.ny.gov. You can just search that as well. You do have to wait about a week for the FAFSA to process and then go and complete the state application. If you do it before then, it won't link up. And New York State specifically does have need-based aid, which is typically called the TAP program, the Tuition Assistance Program. For that, there is an income cutoff. Your New York State net taxable income has to be $80,000 or below. So just keep that in mind for when you're applying for that, but then you also have some need-based or merit-based scholarships as well. again, can use information from the FAFSA. Private sources and employers, again, this is kind of on yourself as a student to kind of start looking for these. If you're a current senior, I recommend, fall, winter, really starting to look for some things that might be out there, and kind of getting prepared to apply for those scholarships that open up, when typically they open in January and are due March, April, something like that. Deadlines apply, vary from each one, so you really need to pay attention. Check with your high school guidance counselor. They probably have scholarships that are specific maybe to the district or to the area. There are, like national sites like scholarships.com, fastweb.com. I encourage you to check those out as well, create profiles for those and see what might be out there. But just keep in mind that those are, you're competing with everybody in the nation for some of those, whereas a lot of the local ones are just for, students locally from Western New York or from wherever you're at, because you might not be in Western New York watching this. All right, the last thing I wanted to touch on today is kind of going over some special conditions or appeals. When you do complete the FAFSA form, you do have to use, the prior year's information. So again, for the upcoming year of 22-23, you're using 2020 tax information. But of course, with COVID and the pandemic, lots of things have happened since then. So if you are no longer as a family, at the same income level, or maybe a divorce has happened, or whatever the case might be, you can definitely talk to the schools you're applying to see if there's anything that they can do. So there's really kind of two different appeals, what we'll call it. So it's the first one, which we call, special conditions or professional judgment. And this is when, there has been, you complete your FAFSA based on the 2020 information, but there's been a reduction in income. Someone lost a job. So what most schools will do, again, contact the ones you're interested in. And if you're applying to, let's say, like 10 schools or more, I would narrow it down to the ones you're truly interested in, because there might be a lot of additional paperwork you have to fill out. So you probably don't want to do that for every single school, just really the ones that you're truly interested in attending. And so you contact the school, explain the situation, and each school is different in how they process these. Here at Niagara, we'll open up a specific form in your mobile account. You'll have to kind of go on and, upload a statement and attach documentation, whether it's a pay stub or 2021 taxes, whatever the case might be. You're going to have to upload some type of documentation showing the actual reduction in income or whatever the case might be. So this is what we would call professional judgment. Now there's other cases where maybe nothing has changed, family size is still the same, there's been no reduction in income, everything's kind of similar, but you just know that you're going to need some additional funding to help kind of get you through attending that university. So if that's the case, again, you would reach out to that school or schools you're interested in, explain the situation or, why you think you would need additional funding. And again, each school is different, but most times they'll take it to like an appeals committee and review and see if there's anything more that they could do for you. Now, the worst thing they can say is no. So it doesn't hurt to, to see if there is anything additional that would, potentially help you out. The last thing I want to touch on is the financial aid award letter, really offer worksheet. This is something really handy to use when you start receiving those financial aid offers from all the different schools. I really encourage you to take the time and to really break it down between all the different schools, list out what their charges are, because each school is going to be different with what their tuition fees and room and board are. And, break down, did I get Pell Grants, state grants, merit scholarships? Did I get work study, loans? Really break it all down and really see what that net price is so you can really compare apples to apples, because this is one of the most important decisions you're going to be making, in the next few years. And you really want to make sure that it's the right choice for you and your family. And part of that, a large part, of course, is financially. So it really needs to make financial sense for you to attend, the schools that you're looking at, so that you set yourself up, for the future. So really make sure you break this down and you really know exactly what it is. And this will also potentially help you if you are appealing to schools and you're maybe comparing them, one school to another. It would be helpful to have this handy to kind of show them, I'm really interested in your school, but the other school gave me it costs like $3,000 less or something. So that can help you with that scenario as well. All right, so that is a lot of information. I totally understand that in a short amount of time. So we are here to help you. Feel free to contact our financial aid office at NU. We can help you with, general questions either about the FAFSA or maybe something that you don't understand or have questions on financial aid wise. I would say though, if you are starting to get into more specific questions about a specific school, you need to contact that school. And really contact, that's what financial aid offices are here for at all the schools, to help students and families through this process. So don't don't hesitate to reach out to any of the schools you're applying to see if there's any, if you any help with anything that you come up with throughout this financial aid process. But again, if you have something you want to reach out to us about here at Niagara, our contact information is on the screen. My email is up there, or you can email fao@niagara.edu. That is our main email, and we will, reply back to you as quickly as we can. Thank you so much for attending today and viewing this. If you have any questions, as I said, please contact us or the financial aid offices at the schools that you're applying to. I hope you have a great day. Bye.